She didn't realize I was still on the line when her family crossed a line they can't undo. The call hadn't disconnected. That's the chilling realization I made at 9:33 on a Friday night, sitting in my construction site office, 3 hours away from home. I heard my wife Lauren's voice come through the phone speaker, casual, almost relieved, saying, "Okay, he's gone. We can talk freely now." My blood ran cold, because those weren't just her words. They were the opening line of a plot to destroy my life, hatched by the very people I called family. I'd called her 20 minutes earlier to say goodnight, told her I loved her, heard her say it back. The call should have ended. But my phone was still connected, the timer still running, and now I was hearing voices I recognized. Lauren's father, Donald. Her mother, Barbara. Her brother, Ethan. All of them gathered in my living room, in the house I'd bought, having a conversation they thought was private. Donald spoke first, his voice carrying that executive authority he used in business meetings. "So, we're all agreed. Once the trust fund from his father's estate clears, we move forward with the divorce." My hands went completely cold. I sat frozen at my desk, phone on speaker, listening to my wife's family discuss divorcing me the moment I inherited money from my recently deceased father. I'd been married to Lauren Bennett for 4 years, together for 6. We'd met at a charity fundraiser in Portland where she'd been volunteering, and I'd been representing my construction company, Everett & Sons, the business my father had built over 35 years. She'd been smart, funny, gorgeous in a way that seemed effortless. We'd started dating within a week, got engaged after 18 months, married in a ceremony her parents had insisted on paying for. I should have seen that as a red flag, the way they'd taken control of our wedding. But I'd been in love, and honestly, grateful they seemed to accept me. My father, Thomas Everett, had died 2 months ago from a sudden stroke at age 68. The grief had been overwhelming, the logistics of settling his estate even more so. He'd left everything to me, the construction company, worth approximately $12 million, his house, his investments, and a trust fund that was currently being processed through probate. Total value somewhere around $18 million. I told Lauren about the inheritance. Obviously, we were married. We talked about what we'd do with the money, how we'd expand the business, maybe buy a bigger house, start a family. I thought we were planning our future together. Lauren's voice came through the phone speaker again, and my stomach dropped. But what if he doesn't agree to the divorce? What if he fights me on the settlement? Donald laughed, cold and calculating. He won't fight. You've been documenting his emotional distance, his long work hours, his neglect of the marriage. We have texts, journal entries, everything we need to paint him as an absent workaholic who drove you away. Plus, Oregon is a no-fault state. You file, claim irreconcilable differences, and you're entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage. Barbara chimed in, her voice sweet and poisonous. And the inheritance counts as marital property since he's receiving it while you're still married. Even though his father died before we discussed divorce, the actual transfer of assets is happening now. Our attorney says you can claim up to $9 million if we play this right. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. They had an attorney. They'd been planning this. The inheritance from my father, the man who'd built everything from nothing, who'd worked himself to exhaustion to leave me something substantial, was being targeted by people I'd thought were my family. Ethan spoke next, younger and more aggressive than his father. What about the company? Can she claim part of Everett & Sons? Donald responded. That's trickier. The company predates the marriage and was technically owned by Thomas, not Daniel. But Daniel has been running it for the past 8 years, has increased its value significantly during the marriage. We can argue that Lauren's emotional support and sacrifice enabled that growth, that she's entitled to compensation. I'd been working 80-hour weeks for 8 years building my father's company into something exceptional, and they wanted to claim Lauren's emotional support had enabled it. Lauren, who'd quit her administrative job 2 years into our marriage to pursue photography, a career I'd financially supported while she built her portfolio. Lauren, who'd complained about my work hours, but benefited from the income they generated. Lauren, who was apparently planning to divorce me the moment my father's death made me wealthy enough to be worth destroying. The conversation continued. I should have hung up, should have stopped listening, but I couldn't move. Barbara asked, "Are you sure you want to go through with this, sweetheart? You did love him once, didn't you?" Lauren's response came quick and dismissive. "Mom, I love the idea of him. The successful business owner, the nice house, the financial security. But the reality is boring. He's boring. All he talks about is construction projects and deadlines. He doesn't travel, doesn't like the same restaurants I like, doesn't want to socialize with our friends. I've been ready to leave for a year, but Dad said to wait until the inheritance cleared. Now it's clearing, and I'm done pretending." The words landed like physical blows. Boring. Ready to leave for a year. Pretending. Our entire marriage had been a performance, and I'd been the only one who didn't know. Ethan laughed. At least you'll be set up nicely afterward. $9 million is a solid consolation prize for 4 years of pretending to love someone. You can travel wherever you want, date whoever you want. Donald added, and once the divorce is final and the assets are divided, we can invest your settlement properly. I've already spoken with our wealth management team about strategies. They had it all planned, the divorce, the asset division, the investments afterward. This wasn't a spontaneous decision or a marriage falling apart naturally. This was a calculated extraction of wealth from someone they'd all pretended to accept into their family. I thought about every holiday dinner at the Bennett house, every family gathering where Donald had clapped me on the shoulder and called me son. Every conversation with Barbara where she'd asked about grandchildren, about our plans for the future. Every time Ethan had borrowed money from me for various failed business ventures, promising to pay me back, but never doing it. All of it had been theater. They'd been waiting for my father to die so they could position Lauren for maximum financial benefit. I pulled out my laptop with shaking hands, opened the voice recording software I used for client meetings, and started recording the phone call. Every word was being captured now. Their discussion of attorneys, settlement amounts, strategies to paint me as a neglectful husband. 15 minutes of my wife and her family discussing how to destroy my life and steal the inheritance my father had left me. When they finally finished and hung up, my phone showed the call had lasted 38 minutes total. I sat in silence, listening to the recording again to make sure it was clear. Every word was audible, undeniable. I saved multiple copies to cloud storage, sent one to my personal email, backed it up on an external drive. Then I called the one person I knew could help me, my father's estate attorney, Raymond Fisher. He was 64 years old, had been practicing law for 37 years, and had handled my father's business for 2 decades. He picked up on the third ring despite the late hour. Daniel, is everything all right? No, I need your help. Something's happened with Lauren. I played him the recording, listened to his breathing change as he heard the Bennett family plotting to take half of everything my father had left me. When it ended, he was silent for a long moment. Then, this is bad. This is really bad. But it's also the best thing that could have happened to you. What do you mean? I mean, they just handed you every piece of evidence you need to protect yourself in a divorce. Oregon is a no-fault state, but equitable distribution of assets takes into account factors like fraud and bad faith. If you can prove Lauren entered the marriage with intent to defraud you or that she's manipulating the divorce for financial gain, a judge can rule that she's not entitled to marital property. Can you prove that with this recording? I think so. Raymond's voice was thoughtful, calculating. They're discussing premeditation, conspiracy to commit fraud, manipulation of marital assets. This goes beyond a simple divorce. This might be grounds for criminal charges if we can prove she married you specifically to access your assets or if they've been planning this since before your father's death. What do I do? First, don't let them know you heard this. Act normal. Second, we need to move fast. If Lauren files for divorce first, she controls the narrative. We need to file first on grounds of fraud and seeking a court order to freeze marital assets until the case is heard. Third, we need to get you a divorce attorney who specializes in high-asset cases and fraud. I know someone. Her name is Patricia Novak. She's been practicing for 26 years, and she's ruthless. I'll call her tonight. I hung up and sat in my office trailer at the construction site, staring at nothing. My marriage was over. Had been over apparently for longer than I'd realized. Lauren had been performing love while waiting for my father to die so she could take half of everything and leave. The woman I'd planned a future with, the woman I'd supported and trusted and loved, was a stranger. I drove home the next morning, 3 hours on the highway with my mind racing through every moment of our relationship, trying to figure out when it had turned, when Lauren had decided I was worth more divorced than married. Or maybe she'd known from the start. Maybe meeting me at that charity fundraiser had been calculated. A wealthy construction company owner with a successful business and aging father. Maybe everything had been part of the plan. I arrived home at 11:30 to find Lauren making breakfast, acting perfectly normal. Hey babe, how was the site? Everything on schedule? Fine. I kept my voice level even though I wanted to scream. Just tired, long week. She came over, kissed me, asked if I wanted coffee. I accepted, watched her pour it, wondered how many times she'd done this exact routine while secretly planning my destruction. My phone buzzed. A text from Raymond. Patricia Novak will meet you Monday at 9 a.m., her office downtown. Don't tell Lauren. I deleted the text immediately. Spent the rest of the weekend pretending everything was normal while my wife pretended to love me. Both of us acting out roles in a play that was about to close. Monday morning, I told Lauren I had a meeting with the estate attorney about the inheritance paperwork. Not technically a lie. She wished me luck, kissed me goodbye, went back to editing photos on her laptop. I drove to downtown Portland, met Patricia Novak in her corner office with a view of the Willamette River. She was a woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes and an even sharper demeanor. Raymond played me your recording, she gestured for me to sit. I've been practicing family law for 26 years and I've never heard anything quite like this. They're not even being subtle. They're openly discussing fraud, asset manipulation, and conspiracy. This is gold for our case, but we need to move carefully. What's the plan? We file for divorce today, citing fraud, and requesting the court freeze all marital assets pending investigation. We submit the recording as evidence of Lauren's intent to defraud you of your inheritance. We request the court examine the timeline of your relationship, the marriage, and the inheritance to determine if Lauren entered the marriage in bad faith. And we go for a zero settlement. She gets nothing. Can we actually do that? If we can prove fraud, yes. Oregon law allows courts to award zero marital property to a spouse who acted in bad faith or attempted to defraud the other spouse. With this recording, we have clear evidence of bad faith. Patricia pulled out paperwork, started filling in details. I need you to be honest with me about your finances. Everything you own, everything you've earned, everything from your father's estate. I spent 2 hours detailing everything. The construction company worth $12 million, the house worth $800,000, the investment accounts worth $2 million, the incoming inheritance worth another $18 million. Total assets approximately $33 million. Patricia whistled. Lauren's family thinks she's getting $9 million. They're actually going to get nothing. We filed the divorce papers at 4:15 that afternoon. Patricia had included a motion for an emergency hearing based on evidence of fraud, requesting the court freeze all marital assets and bank accounts until the case could be heard. The papers were served to Lauren at 6:33 that evening by a process server while I was still at Patricia's office preparing for what came next. My phone started ringing at 6:45. Lauren calling repeatedly. I didn't answer. Then texts started flooding in. What is this? Why are you divorcing me? We need to talk. This is insane. Call me back right now. You're making a huge mistake. I ignored all of it. Patricia had advised me not to engage, to let the legal process handle everything. At 7:15, Donald called. I answered, put it on speaker so Patricia could hear. Daniel, what the hell is going on? Lauren is in hysterics. She says you filed for divorce and froze all the bank accounts. That's correct. We're getting divorced. I'm not discussing it with you. This is between me and Lauren. You can't just freeze her out of your accounts. She's your wife. She has rights. Actually, I can. And I did. When there's evidence of fraud and asset manipulation, the court grants temporary freezes. You'd know that if your attorney had mentioned it. There was a long pause. Then Donald's voice changed, became harder. What attorney? What are you talking about? The attorney you consulted about divorcing me and taking half of my father's inheritance. The attorney who told you Lauren could claim $9 million. The one you discussed during your family meeting last Friday night. Another pause. I don't know what you think you heard, but I heard everything. Your daughter forgot to hang up the phone after we said goodnight. I have a recording of your entire conversation. Every word about the divorce plan, the asset division strategy, the timeline you've been following. All of it. The line went dead. He'd hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. A number I didn't recognize. I answered, Daniel Everett. This is Lawrence Bennett, attorney for Lauren Everett and the Bennett family. I'm calling to discuss the divorce filing and request you withdraw the fraud allegations immediately. Who are you? I'm the attorney retained by the Bennett family to represent their interests in this matter. I understand you've made some serious accusations that could be considered defamatory. Patricia took the phone from me. This is Patricia Novak, Mr. Everett's attorney. If you're calling to negotiate, you can reach me at my office number during business hours. If you're calling to threaten my client with defamation claims, I should inform you that we have recorded evidence of your clients discussing conspiracy to commit fraud. I'd suggest you review Oregon's laws on marital fraud before making additional threats. She hung up, looked at me. They're going to fight this hard. Donald Bennett is a wealthy man with resources. They'll throw everything at us to make this go away. Are you ready for that? I thought about my father. About the years he'd worked to build something worth leaving behind. About Lauren's dismissive voice calling me boring. Calling our marriage pretending. I'm ready. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 3 days later, Thursday morning. In the meantime, Lauren and her family went on the offensive. They hired a PR firm, started planting stories with local media about the contentious divorce, painting me as a controlling husband who'd cut off his grieving wife's access to money. They filed countermotions claiming the recording was illegally obtained, that I'd violated her privacy, that the freeze on assets was leaving Lauren destitute. None of it worked. Patricia filed the recording with the court under seal, provided expert testimony from a digital forensic specialist named Dr. Isaac Thornton, who confirmed the audio was authentic and unaltered. She submitted my phone records showing the call had been initiated by me with Lauren's knowledge, that the failure to disconnect was technological, not intentional surveillance. She provided bank statements showing I deposited $30,000 into Lauren's personal account just 2 weeks before the recording, proving she wasn't destitute. The judge, Honorable Margaret Doyle, 61 years old with 28 years on the bench, reviewed everything in chambers before the hearing. When we walked into the courtroom Thursday morning, her expression was severe. Lauren sat across the aisle with her parents and Ethan. All of them dressed extensively, looking like the perfect wronged family. Lawrence Bennett, their attorney, was a polished man in his 50s who specialized in high-asset divorces. He started with a motion to dismiss the fraud allegations, arguing that a private conversation couldn't be used as evidence against his clients. Judge Doyle cut him off. The conversation was recorded accidentally during a phone call initiated by the plaintiff with the defendant's knowledge. There was no illegal surveillance, no wiretapping, no privacy violation. The recording is admissible. Mr. Bennett, I've reviewed the audio. Do you want to continue arguing that your clients weren't discussing manipulation of marital assets for financial gain? Lawrence sat down. Patricia stood, addressed the court. Your Honor, the evidence clearly shows that Mrs. Everett and her family have been planning this divorce specifically to coincide with Mr. Everett's inheritance from his deceased father. They've consulted with attorneys, discussed settlement amounts, and admitted that Mrs. Everett has been, quote, pretending to love him for at least a year. This goes beyond typical marital discord. This is premeditated fraud. Judge Doyle looked at Lauren. Mrs. Everett, did you make the statements captured in this recording? Do you deny discussing divorce plans and asset division with your family? Lauren looked at her attorney. Lawrence nodded. She spoke, her voice small. I may have said some things in anger and frustration, but that doesn't mean I've been planning this. Marriages fall apart. People say things they don't mean when they're upset. Judge Doyle played a section of the recording. Lauren's voice came through clearly. I've been ready to leave for a year, but Dad said to wait until the inheritance cleared. The judge stopped the playback. That doesn't sound like something said in momentary anger. That sounds like coordinated planning over an extended timeline. I'm granting the asset freeze and ordering both parties to undergo financial discovery. We will examine every transaction, every account, every asset to determine what is legitimately marital property and what may have been targeted through fraud. Trial is set for 6 weeks from today. Lawrence tried to object. Your Honor, 6 weeks is insufficient time to prepare a defense. We need at least 3 months. Judge Doyle's expression didn't change. Your clients spent over a year planning this divorce. They can prepare their defense in 6 weeks. The hearing ended. Lauren tried to approach me in the hallway, tears streaming down her face. Daniel, please. We need to talk. Can we just talk about this? Patricia stepped between us. No contact, Mrs. Everett. All communication goes through attorneys. Over the next 6 weeks, the discovery process revealed everything. Patricia subpoenaed the Bennett family's financial records. Found emails between Donald and Lawrence Bennett dated back 8 months, discussing strategy for Lauren's eventual divorce. Found texts between Lauren and her mother discussing timeline, how long to wait after my father's death before filing. Found journal entries Lauren had written, clearly coached by their attorney, documenting my supposed emotional distance and neglect. Every entry dated within the past 6 months. Obvious fabrications designed to support her divorce case. Patricia also found something else, a prenuptial agreement I'd completely forgotten about. My father had insisted on it before the wedding, worried about protecting the family business. Lauren had signed it without argument, and I'd filed it away and never thought about it again. The agreement stated that in the event of divorce, Lauren would receive a maximum settlement of $250,000 and waive all claims to Everett and Sons and any inheritance from my family. Patricia called me when she found it. Did you know you had a prenup? I'd forgotten. Dad insisted on it. Lauren signed it before the wedding. This changes everything. With this prenup, Lauren isn't entitled to anything beyond the specified amount. Her entire plan was based on claiming half of marital assets, but she already waived that right. She signed away her claims before you even got married. Why would she sign it if she was planning this from the start? Maybe she didn't read it carefully. Maybe Donald didn't think to check. Maybe they assumed they could challenge it later. But prenups in Oregon are generally enforceable unless signed under duress or without proper legal counsel. And I see here that Lauren had her own attorney review it before signing, an attorney her father paid for. Donald Bennett paid for his daughter's attorney to review a prenup that she then signed, waiving her rights to your assets. He approved this, which means either they didn't plan this from the beginning or they're spectacularly incompetent. I'd put my money on incompetent. Patricia sounded almost gleeful. This case just became a slam dunk. The trial started on a Monday in late November. The courtroom was packed with media, curious onlookers, and both families. My mother had flown in from Arizona, sat beside me, looking supportive and furious. Lauren's extended family filled several rows, all of them shooting daggers at me with their eyes. Patricia's case was methodical and devastating. She presented the recording, played key excerpts for the jury, presented the emails and texts showing premeditation, presented the fabricated journal entries Lauren had created to support her case, presented the prenuptial agreement with Lauren's signature. Lawrence tried to argue that the prenup was signed under duress, that I'd threatened to call off the wedding if Lauren didn't sign. Patricia countered with testimony from the attorney who'd represented Lauren during the prenup negotiations, a woman named Deborah Pierce, who'd been practicing for 31 years. She stated clearly that Lauren had shown no signs of duress, had read the agreement carefully, and had signed voluntarily after her father approved it. Lawrence tried to argue that the recording was taken out of context, that the Bennett family had been speaking hypothetically. Patricia played the entire 38-minute recording for the jury. There was nothing hypothetical about it. They discussed specific dollar amounts, specific timelines, specific attorneys. The jury heard every word. I took the stand on day 3. Testified about my relationship with Lauren, about supporting her career change, about thinking we were building a future together, about the phone call that hadn't disconnected, about hearing my wife admit she'd been pretending to love me, about learning that her entire family had been waiting for my father to die so they could position themselves for maximum financial benefit. Lawrence cross-examined me aggressively. Isn't it true that you worked excessive hours and neglected your marriage? I worked hard to build a business, yes. The same business that provided the lifestyle Lauren enjoyed. Isn't it true that your wife repeatedly asked you to spend more time with her and you refused? My wife never expressed dissatisfaction with our marriage until after my father died and she saw the potential inheritance. Lawrence held up Lauren's journal. These entries detail months of loneliness and emotional neglect. Why should we believe they're fabricated? Because they're all dated within the past 6 months. All written in the same pen with the same handwriting style. And all contain language that sounds like it came from a divorce attorney coaching his client on how to document neglect. Real journals have variations in pen, in handwriting, in emotional tone. These read like a script. Patricia had brought in a handwriting analyst, Dr. Vivian Cross, with a PhD in forensic document examination and 19 years of experience testifying in court cases. She confirmed that the journal entries had all been written in a single sitting, probably within the past few months. Definitely not over the extended timeline they claimed. Another piece of evidence crumbling. Lauren took the stand on day 5. She cried, said she'd loved me, that the marriage had fallen apart naturally, and she'd made mistakes in how she'd discussed it with her family. Said she'd never intended to defraud me, had only been venting frustration. Patricia destroyed her on cross-examination. Mrs. Everett, in the recording, you stated that you'd been, quote, ready to leave for a year. Is that accurate? Lauren hesitated. I was frustrated. People say things they don't mean. So, you didn't mean it when you said you'd been pretending to love your husband? I meant that I'd been trying to make the marriage work even though we had problems. Patricia pulled up the recording transcript. Let me read your exact words. I loved the idea of him. The successful business owner, the nice house, the financial security. But the reality is boring. He's boring. That doesn't sound like trying to make the marriage work. That sounds like you married him for money and status. Objection. Leading. Sustained. Patricia shifted tactics. Mrs. Everett, how much did your father pay for your attorney to review the prenuptial agreement before your wedding? I don't remember. But you did have an attorney review it before signing? Yes. And that attorney told you that by signing you were waiving your rights to your husband's business and any family inheritance? Yes. But, and you signed anyway? Yes. So you voluntarily gave up claims to your husband's assets before marrying him, then spent the next 4 years positioning yourself to claim those same assets in a divorce despite having waived your rights. How is that not fraud? Lawrence objected. Judge Doyle overruled. The witness will answer. Lauren looked at her attorney desperately. I didn't think about it that way. I just wanted to make my father happy by signing the prenup. Then, after we were married, things changed. The law changed. I didn't think the prenup would still be valid. Mrs. Everett, did someone tell you the prenup might not be valid, or did you just hope that was the case? Lawrence objected again. Judge Doyle was losing patience. Mr. Bennett, your client opened this door with her testimony. Overruled. Lauren's voice came out barely above a whisper. My father said prenups could be challenged. That if we waited long enough and I documented problems in the marriage, a judge might set it aside. Patricia let that answer hang in the air. So your father advised you to document false problems in your marriage in order to invalidate a legal agreement you'd voluntarily signed. And you followed that advice, created fake journal entries, timed your divorce filing to coincide with your husband's inheritance, all while claiming this was simply a marriage that naturally fell apart. Lauren started crying. I loved him. I did. Maybe at first, but then. You wanted the money more. Is that accurate? Objection, Your Honor. She's badgering the witness. Judge Doyle looked at Lauren. Mrs. Everett, you need to answer the question honestly. Did you love your husband, or did you love his money? Lauren looked at her parents in the gallery. Donald shook his head slightly, telling her not to answer. She looked back at Patricia. I don't have to answer that. Actually, you do. Patricia's voice was calm. You're under oath. You testified that you loved your husband. I'm asking you to clarify whether you loved him or his financial status. Lawrence's facade cracked. Both. I loved both. And when the marriage became difficult, I had to think about protecting myself financially. That's not a crime. No, but conspiring with your family to manipulate timing and document false evidence to maximize your settlement is. Patricia sat down. No further questions. The trial lasted 9 days. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Found in my favor on all counts. The marriage had been entered in bad faith. Lauren had attempted to defraud me of marital assets, and the prenuptial agreement remained valid and enforceable. Lauren was awarded $0 beyond the $250,000 specified in the prenup. No claim to the house, the business, the inheritance, or any other assets. The Bennett family sat in stunned silence as the verdict was read. Outside the courthouse, Lawrence made a statement about appealing. Patricia responded immediately, an appeal is Mr. Bennett's right, but the evidence in this case is overwhelming. The recording alone proves intent to defraud. The prenup eliminates any legitimate claim to assets, and Mrs. Everett's testimony destroyed any remaining credibility. I don't see an appeal succeeding. A reporter asked me how I felt. I looked directly at the camera. I feel vindicated. My wife and her family spent years planning to destroy me financially the moment my father died. They underestimated me. They assumed I'd never find out. That I'd accept being manipulated. That I'd hand over half of everything my father built without a fight. They were wrong. And now they face the consequences of their own greed. That clip went viral within hours. The story exploded across media. Construction company owner accidentally records wife's family planning to divorce him for inheritance money. Donald Bennett's reputation took a massive hit. Several business partners pulled out of deals. Barbara was quietly asked to step down from her position on several charity boards. Ethan, who'd been trying to launch another startup, found investors suddenly unavailable. The social consequences rippled through their entire family. Lauren tried to reach out 2 weeks after the verdict. Sent me a letter through Patricia's office. 5 pages of apology, claiming she'd been manipulated by her family, that she'd really loved me once, that she wanted a chance to explain. Patricia advised me not to respond. She's still looking for an angle, still hoping there's some way to salvage financial benefit from this. Don't give her anything. I didn't. Threw the letter away unread after the first paragraph. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Lauren got her $250,000 and nothing else. I kept the house, the business, the inheritance. Everything my father had built and left to me remained intact. I hired a forensic accountant, Janet Wu, with a PhD in accounting and 16 years of experience in fraud detection, to review all of the Bennett family's financial dealings with me over the years. Found that Ethan had borrowed a total of $89,000 for various ventures, none of which he'd repaid. Found that I'd paid for 3 family vacations, 2 car repairs for Barbara, and a roof replacement on Donald's vacation house. Total financial drain from the Bennett family over 4 years, approximately $230,000, almost exactly what Lauren got in the settlement. Patricia filed a civil suit to recover the loans and expenses. The Bennetts settled for $150,000 to avoid additional public trial, said they couldn't afford more after the legal fees from the divorce. A year after the divorce, I was running Everett and Sons successfully, had expanded into 3 new markets, and was dating someone new. Her name was Olivia. She was a structural engineer I'd met on a job site, and she thought the Bennett family story was insane. "You really heard the whole thing by accident?" she asked one night over dinner. "The phone just stayed connected. Complete accident. If she'd hung up properly, I'd probably be divorced, broke, and destroyed by now." Olivia shook her head. "They really underestimated you. Everyone does. I'm quiet. I work hard. I don't make waves. People assume that means I'm weak or easy to manipulate. The Bennetts found out differently." She reached across the table, took my hand. "I'm glad you fought back. I'm glad you protected what your father left you. Me, too." 2 years later, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. Lauren was getting married to a doctor she'd met. Apparently, someone with money of his own. The invitation felt like a final insult, but I threw it away and moved on. Married Olivia 6 months later in a small ceremony with an ironclad prenup that she insisted on. Said she wanted me to know she was marrying me for me, not for my money. The Bennett family slowly faded from my life and my thoughts. Donald's business suffered but survived. Barbara and Lauren remained close, probably bonding over their failed attempt to manipulate me. Ethan moved to California, still looking for his big break. I never spoke to any of them again. 5 years after the divorce, I was reviewing old files when I found the recording saved on my computer. I listened to it again, heard Donald's voice discussing divorce strategy, Lauren's voice calling me boring, heard them plotting to take everything, and I realized something I hadn't fully understood at the time. That phone call, staying connected, hadn't just saved my finances. It had saved me from wasting more years with people who saw me as a target, not family. It had given me clarity about who people really were behind their masks. It had taught me that sometimes the worst betrayals come from the people closest to you, and the only defense is vigilance and proof. The recording had been accidental, but what I did with it had been deliberate, calculated, and absolutely necessary. The Bennetts had planned my destruction while sitting in my living room, in the house I'd bought, confident I'd never know. They'd been wrong, and that mistake had cost them everything: the settlement they'd planned for, their reputations, their social standing, and any chance of manipulating me ever again. In the end, the only thing Lauren got from our marriage was exactly what the prenup specified, and a hard lesson about underestimating quiet people. Because sometimes the person you think is too boring to notice is the one documenting every word, building a case, and waiting for the perfect moment to let your own greed destroy you. Have you ever faced a betrayal that was so shocking it forced you to completely reevaluate everything you thought you knew? How did you gather your strength and fight back? Tell me your story in the comments below.